Coronation Street fans, you're not ready for this. Welcome to your #1 source for exclusive spoilers, shocking twists, and daily updates from Weatherfield. Gary Windass was lately told by Sarah Platt that Theo Silverton is potentially abusing Todd Grimshaw in Coronation Street. Gary has been mates with Theo for a little while, so he plotted with the fact he's further than probably been unconscious to what his so-called friend has been doing. He demanded to witness the dynamic between Theo and Todd for himself, so he decided to invite himself over to their flat. Gary ain't a man you want to cross. The trouble, making prankish builder has crossed the line between tortured anti-idol and straight-up villain on further than many occasions, substantially when he killed 2 people. Not only was he responsible for the plant roof collapse that redounded in the death of Rana Habib, but he manipulated events and people to shift the blame over to Carla Connor. Still, the dark deed that put Gary in the Weatherfield Villains Hall of Fame was killing ruthless lone wolf Rick Nalon in Tone, Defense, before taking over the miscreant's business and getting just as ruthless. While Gary since turned over a new splint and settled down into family life with his woman, Maria Connor, his old killer band is still under the face staying to strike. The man radiates, "You revealed my pint energy" every time he trudges into the Rover's return. All he's waiting for is some wrong-un to hang his nearest and dearest. To give him a reason to explode for months, Theo has subordinated his mate Todd to all manner of terrible abuse, including emotional manipulation, physical control, and bouts of intimidating violence. Lately, the vile bully actually pulled a cutter on his mate during a blazing row, and rather of backing down, a broken Todd dared Theo to put him out of his misery. Without fear, Theo's hold over his victim was broken, so he ended their relationship to cover his own pride. Still, the green-eyed monster reared its unattractive head again when Todd started moving on with another man, egging Theo to intimately spike his drink so he could play the idol and trap Todd formally more in this poisonous relationship. After successfully worming his way back into Todd's life, Theo decided to bound them together ever by getting wedded. It was far from the happiest day of Todd's life, as Theo principally forced him to the registry office and made him feel as though he couldn't say no. In the cantina, George Shuttleworth's fears that commodity was wrong with Todd's relationship started to increase when he set out about the arbitrary marriage. His enterprises were virtually verified the coming day, when George heard Theo spouting vile abuse in the flat. George told Todd's loved bones that he thinks he's being abused, and tried to come up with a plan to save him. While in the flat, Gary spoke to Theo while keeping a close eye on Todd's jest. He was completely apprehensive of how nervous he was around Theo, and could indeed see his hands shaking while he made some teas. When Todd was out of the room, Gary brazened Theo and stated that he knows who he really is. Commonly, Theo claimed that he'd no idea what Gary was talking about. Now Gary has some idea of what Theo has been doing to Todd. Will he take violent action to get relief of him? With James Cartwright's exit blazoned before this time, will Gary's murderous side rear its unattractive head again? With a juicy whodunit about to protest off in the cobbles, one must wonder if Gary will soon be burying a certain ex-employee in concrete Coronation Street, has participated a teaser for a forthcoming scene, with a clip attesting Gary Windass's dark trouble to the evil Theo Silverton as he finds out the verity about his close friend's vituperative ways. Over the once many months, the ITV cleaner has been exploring a domestic abuse plot in which Theo has come decreasingly violent and controlling towards his mate, Todd Grimshaw. Despite being suitable to keep his evil ways behind unrestricted doors, the net is beginning to close in on Theo, whose true colors were exposed before this week after George Shuttleworth eavesdropped one of his angry outbursts. After George participated his studies with Christina Boyd and Summer Spellman, the group will inform Glenda Shuttleworth and Sarah Platt of the matter. Sarah also tells Theo's good friend Gary, who accompanies Todd to the flat and catches Theo crying abuse. Theo rails at Todd when he hears his key in the door, but he has no idea that he is not alone, our bigwig said. Gary has seen his friend for what he truly is, so wastes no time in sacking him from the builder's yard, leaving him with a stern warning to watch his reverse. In a scene set to state on Sunday, which can be previewed below, Gary becomes suspicious when Todd putatively hides in the bedroom, and points out to Theo that Todd seems shaky. 2 days of marriage and he is formally hiding in the bedroom, says Gary. After the brace share a nervous laugh, Gary points out, and his hands were shaking when he made the tea. Theo calls Todd a nervous Nelly, saying his demeanor is down to the allegations being thrown at George. When Gary says it has nothing to do with George, Theo asks, "Is everything okay?" Gary confronts him about what Sarah told him, and warns Theo that he'll deliver some discipline if he is set up to have abused Todd. However, flashback what I did to Noah. Gary says, adding, "I am on to you. If I set up out it's true." Theo is rattled as Gary leaves, telling him that he has his cables crossed. But with several Weatherfield residers noticing his vituperative jest, has the villain eventually been caught out for good? The atmosphere on the cobbles begins to shift the moment suspicion turns into something far more dangerous: certainty. What once existed as quiet concern whispered behind closed doors now grows into a storm of confrontation, protection, and barely contained rage. At the center of it all stands Gary Windass, a man whose past is soaked in violence, regret, and buried instincts that have never truly disappeared. When Sarah Platt confides in him that Theo Silverton may be abusing Todd Grimshaw, something inside Gary stirs, something old, something dangerous, something that doesn't believe in second chances for men like Theo. At first, Gary doesn't want to believe it. Friendship, even a fragile one, creates a kind of blindness. Theo had been someone he shared laughs with, someone who had slipped into his circle without raising alarms. The idea that this same man could be hiding something so sinister feels almost impossible to accept. But Gary isn't naive, not anymore. Life has taught him that monsters don't always look the part. Sometimes they smile, shake your hand, and share a drink before revealing what they really are. Still, Gary needs proof. He can't act on hearsay alone, not when the consequences could be irreversible. So he makes a decision to see it for himself. To step into Theo and Todd's world and observe what lies beneath the surface. When he invites himself over to their flat, it's not a social call. It's an investigation. And what he finds there doesn't sit right with him at all. From the moment he walks in, the tension is palpable. Todd's behavior says more than words ever could. There's a nervous energy about him, a quiet unease that clings to his every movement. His hands tremble as he prepares tea, his eyes flicker with silent fear, and there's a noticeable shift in his demeanor whenever Theo is nearby. It's subtle, but to someone like Gary, it's glaringly obvious. He's seen fear before. He's caused it before. And what he's looking at now is unmistakable. Theo, on the other hand, plays his role well. Calm. Dismissive. Almost amused. He brushes off Gary's observations with casual ease, laughing away concerns, labeling Todd as overly sensitive, as if everything is perfectly normal. But that's what makes it worse. The control isn't loud and obvious. It's calculated, insidious, creeping into every corner of Todd's life without leaving visible scars. Emotional manipulation. Psychological dominance. The kind of abuse that thrives in silence. But silence is something Gary cannot tolerate. Because Gary knows exactly where this kind of behavior leads. His own past is proof of that. There was a time when Gary crossed lines that can never be uncrossed. He was responsible for the factory roof collapse that killed Rana Habib, a tragedy that sent shockwaves through Weatherfield. And instead of owning his actions, he manipulated the situation, allowing blame to fall on Carla Connor. That alone was enough to define him as dangerous, but it didn't stop there. His confrontation with loan shark Rick Nalon ended in death, a brutal act of self-defense that spiraled into something darker when Gary took over Rick's criminal empire, becoming just as ruthless as the man he killed. These aren't just stories, they're warnings. Proof that Gary is capable of terrible things when pushed too far. And now, as he watches Theo, he feels that same edge returning. The same instinct to protect, to punish, to eliminate the threat before it destroys someone else. Because Todd doesn't just look uncomfortable. He looks trapped. For months, Theo has tightened his grip, using every tactic imaginable to maintain control. Emotional manipulation keeps Todd doubting himself. Financial control limits his independence. And when those methods aren't enough, Theo resorts to intimidation and violence. The incident with the knife is a turning point, a moment where the danger becomes undeniable. Instead of backing down, Todd, broken and exhausted, challenges Theo, daring him to follow through. It's a heartbreaking act of defiance, one born not from courage, but from despair. That moment should have ended everything. But abusers don't let go that easily. When Todd begins to move on, to seek something better, Theo's jealousy erupts. He resorts to deception, secretly spiking Todd's drink to manipulate the situation and reinsert himself as the hero. It's a twisted cycle: hurt, control, rescue, repeat. And before Todd even realizes what's happening, he's pulled back into the very relationship he was trying to escape. The forced marriage is the ultimate act of control. What should have been a celebration becomes a prison sentence. Todd isn't choosing this. He's being pushed into it, emotionally cornered until saying no feels impossible. Even those around him begin to notice that something isn't right. George Shuttleworth senses the imbalance, the unease, the quiet desperation behind Todd's forced smiles. His concerns grow stronger when he overhears Theo's verbal abuse. Raw, unfiltered, impossible to ignore. That moment changes everything. George speaks up. He shares his fears with others, including Summer Spellman and Glenda Shuttleworth, and together they begin to connect the dots. What once seemed like isolated incidents now forms a clear and terrifying pattern. And when Sarah brings this information to Gary, it sets the stage for confrontation. Back in the flat, the tension reaches its breaking point. Gary watches, waits. And then, when the moment comes, when Todd steps out of the room, Gary makes his move. The air shifts instantly. Gone is the casual visitor. In his place stands a man who knows exactly what he's dealing with. Gary doesn't raise his voice, but there's something far more intimidating in his tone: certainty. He tells Theo that he knows who he really is. It's not a question. It's a statement. Theo denies it, of course. He plays dumb, tries to maintain control of the narrative. But for the first time, there's a crack in his confidence. Because Gary isn't someone you can easily dismiss. And Gary doesn't stop there. He pushes further, making it clear that he's watching, that he's not fooled, that if even a fraction of what he's heard is true, there will be consequences. Serious consequences. The kind that don't involve police or second chances. His warning carries weight. Because Gary has done it before. When he references what he did in the past, what happened to those who crossed him, it's not a threat made lightly. It's a promise wrapped in restraint. A line drawn in the sand. Theo laughs it off, but the unease is there. Because deep down, he knows Gary isn't bluffing. As Gary leaves, the message lingers in the air: he's watching. And he won't hesitate to act if Todd is in danger. Outside, the web tightens. More people are becoming aware of Theo's behavior. The mask is slipping, and the carefully constructed illusion is beginning to collapse. The question is no longer whether Theo will be exposed, but what will happen when he is. And that's where the real danger lies. Because Gary Windass is not a man who waits for justice. He delivers it. The possibility of his darker side resurfacing looms over everything. He has built a new life with Maria Connor, trying to leave behind the violence and chaos that once defined him. But that part of him isn't gone, it's just buried. And Theo may be the one to dig it back up. If Gary believes Todd is truly in danger, there's no telling how far he'll go. Would he confront Theo again? Almost certainly. Would he hurt him? Possibly. Would he kill again? That's the question that hangs heavy over Weatherfield. Because history has a way of repeating itself. And Gary has already proven that when pushed to the edge, he doesn't just cross the line, he obliterates it. As tensions rise and the truth edges closer to the surface, the stakes couldn't be higher. Todd's safety, Theo's fate, and Gary's fragile redemption all hang in the balance. One wrong move, one moment of unchecked anger, and everything could spiral out of control. This isn't just a story about abuse being uncovered. It's a story about what happens when the wrong person decides to step in. Because sometimes, the line between hero and villain isn't clear. And sometimes, the person trying to save you is just as dangerous as the one you need saving from.